Hello, peoples. The Academy Awards is in about 1 week, and I am very nervous, excited, and curious to see where it goes. It looks like it's going to be Anora as our Best Picture winner, but I'm very curious to see who gets SAG Ensemble, because even before we had Anora as our frontrunner, I really thought Conclave was going to win Best Picture. I thought that was going to be the one that sneaks up and wins, and if Conclave gets SAG Ensemble, I honestly might be kind of 50-50. I'd probably still lean Honora, but as a lot of people said earlier, I'm just not sure if the Academy would go for a movie like Honora as their Best Picture winner, but a movie like Conclave looks like something that they would totally eat up. But the Oscar voting closed before Screen Actors Guild, which is tomorrow, so I'm very curious to see how it goes. I still think Honora is probably going to be it no matter what happens at SAG. How I put this, if a Conclave upset happens, I would kind of be irritated with myself for not trusting my gut more, and then if it doesn't happen, I'll be like, well, yeah, it makes sense. So we have 10 Best Picture nominees, and I'll just say I don't think that it's as strong as the other years. I kind of look at this list, and it's a little boring, except for, like the three movies that I just love. But there's another three in this group that, like, there's three movies in this Best Picture 10 where I just stare at them and I go, why are you here? It's sad that three is the number because it feels like three is a pretty high number, particularly when there's only 10 slots. But yeah, there's three here. I just stare at them. I go, what? What were you thinking? But I'm still the guy, that loved Joker too. So who knows? Coming in at number 10 is everybody's number 10, and that is Amelia Perez. I want to start off by saying I don't hate this movie. I think it's just kind of fine. Yes, I know there is complaints about, its representation and stuff like that. But all that was kind of stuff that I didn't, pick up because I don't represent that culture. So it's strictly, this is just my opinion on the movie, the filmmaking. I know, the representation and how it represents those people is heavily involved with, how others view this movie, and their right to be like, yeah, I hated this. They have every right to say that, but that's not something I experienced while watching. In all honesty, if I actually, started to be more interested in this movie, I'd probably, dislike it less. It's still number 10. I still think it's a ridiculous Best Picture nomination. But to get my positives out of the way, it was experimentative at times. I appreciated the experimentative editing. I won't be surprised if this wins Best Editing just because it got so many Oscar nominations. It can't walk away with nothing. Well, it's going to walk away with Best Song, maybe, but if it gets so many Best Picture nominations, it'd be so weird to have a movie so highly nominated to get no wins. I feel like it needs to probably get something besides, Best Song to, live up to the nominations that it had. So I won't be surprised if it gets editing just because it's so experimentative. Like I said, it's not the great movie, so I would still think it's kind of silly that it wins honestly anything. Appreciated that it was not boring. I was not bored while watching this entire movie. I was able to sit down. I think it's a little long too. How long was it? It was 2 hours and 12 minutes, and I was able to sit through that. Fine. I wasn't like, oh my god, bored in my mind. I sat through it. I didn't feel the runtime like that. That's the biggest praise I can give it. Besides that, my biggest issue with the movie is that it's Oscar bait, and it's so sad that they're eating it up the way that there is. Every single decision in this project feels like it was made in the idea of, will this get us more awards or not? And usually when a movie does that so obviously, it shows through, and usually, the Academy just doesn't go for it just because it's so stitched and layered in like this package that makes us go, vote for us, vote for us, vote for us. And usually, like I said, they don't go for it. But this time they totally did, and they totally took the bait. I don't know why. I would assume because it takes all these touchy subjects and makes this what it thinks is a message out of it, and there really isn't like a big message out of this movie. You watch the ending, and I'm just going like, okay, what's the point? Because it's trying to do so much. I'm not gonna say they had bad intentions behind this movie, but it felt like the intentions were lazy. It didn't feel like it was actually trying to do anything. It has this like weird ending to be like, see how amazing this is, and you're just kind of like, I don't know what you were trying to say. It was a breezy watch that just kind of left my mind as soon as I watched it. It's unfortunate it got this many nominations. Like I said, I thought it was an average movie, the most like kind of blah movie ever, and it's like a movie that I would have watched it, kind of forgot about it, then walked in on my parents watching on Netflix 2 years later, just kind of go like, oh yeah, I'll watch that. But the fact that it's getting this much buzz is also inciting all this controversy. Coming in at number 9 is the most popular movie last year that I did not review, and for good reason, because I didn't love it, and that was Wicked. And the unfortunate thing about Wicked is that, I thought over the last few years I was coming around on musicals. I was not a very big musical fan, let's say 5 years ago. I kind of rolled my eyes at every single one of them. But, I watched like West Side Story and even another John M. Chu movie, which I think is much better, In the Heights. I was actually coming around on them. Here we are with Wicked, where it felt like all my complaints about regular musicals are embodied in this movie, and it feels like I just reverted back to who I was 5 years ago. This movie does not need to be 3 hours long. That's not honestly my main complaint, because I think honestly, even though I think it's way too long, I don't think it feels like 3 hours. I just feel like with the amount of story that we got and where the story ends, I kind of go, okay, I felt like I saw most of that and could have assumed most of that in the trailer. And I know there's musical fans who kind of went in probably knowing exactly what this movie was going to be and was just excited for that embodiment of the musical that they love, and that's fine. And if this is, a musical for the fans, I applaud that for the filmmakers, and that's great. But for me, I just watched this kind of going, did not need to be 3 hours long for this little story that's just a part one that doesn't really do much and doesn't really get interesting until the last 45 minutes. Yeah, it's visually bland. The first time I watched this movie, I didn't think it was that bad with the visuals, and then I watched it again because I thought, you know what, I need to get my opinion a little bit higher on this movie because, like, I just wasn't jiving with it like everybody else was, and then I ended up liking it less when I rewatched it. It's just not a movie that I feel like is for me. It feels like it's for the fans, which is great, but for me, not so much. I don't like the way that they lit this movie. I think it's way too long for its story, and I just really wasn't clicking with this movie. Where was Jonathan Bailey nominated for this movie? I don't know exactly what awards he got nominated for, but I just think that is the most absolutely ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It is the most kind of like King Prince Charming type of whatever performance ever, and yet he's getting a nomination for it. It was like the way that Wicked was nominated just proves that Dune 2 should have come out last year on the week that they said it was, because I think it got like the same type of week slot or somewhere in November. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I just think the slew of awards that it's getting is ridiculous, except for production design and costumes. I think it totally deserves that, and I love that about the movie. If it just weren't so drowned out in the boring color palette. Anyway, coming in at number 8 is the last movie where I just kind of look at it going, why are you here? And while I do like this movie much more than the last two, it's still just not a Best Picture nomination for me, and that is a complete unknown. The first time I watched this movie, I think it was when everyone was hyping it up. And I think I thought it was better than I think it is now when I first saw it. It just hasn't aged well because, like any Beatty movie, it heavily depends on how does it sit with you. Because I've seen a lot of awards films that, they have a really impactful feeling once you leave the theater, but then they just don't stick with you at all. A Complete Unknown is a prime example of that. It's a movie where you leave the theater going, that was inspiring, I liked what they did with that, but then I look back, I'm like, it really wasn't that different. Half of this movie is singing, and it's another movie where it feels like it's made for the fans of Bob Dylan, which is something I applaud. Good job on that. You appeased the fans, but I feel like you can, kill two birds with one stone as well. I feel like for people like me, you can please the fans, but also make me watch this movie and not feel like it's just 2.5 hours of singing nonstop. I think the movie was too long. Like, I'm the guy that loved Joker too. I want to keep on saying that. I think there was too much singing in A Complete Unknown. Timothée Chalamet is great. I'll give the movie that. And honestly, if he was winning for this, I'd be like, you know what, it's fine. I'll just pretend it's for Dune Part 2. James Mangold, I don't think he did a great job. I think he got a Best Director nominations because it says James Mangold, but I thought it was a breezy watch. I honestly feel like, watching this movie, I felt like I was watching more of a streaming movie than anything else. I thought it was okay, nothing great. Enjoyable, yes, I liked it a lot more when I was watching it versus the way it's aged with me. It's just, I don't take away much from that movie, nor do I really remember anything from it a few weeks later. And coming in at number 7, now we're in the territory where I like these movies. I think they are all good nominations here throughout. Doesn't mean I think they would be great winners, but I think all these are great nominations, totally deserves it. Movies that I did really like. And coming in at number 7 is Conclave. There are awards films that you need to see how it sticks with you for a little bit before you actually form your opinion. I think Conclave, and honestly these next 3, are a huge testament to that. Watching Conclave, I watched it, I was like, that was pretty good. But then a few weeks later, I'm just like, that was really, really good. Because it sits with you. If Anora wasn't winning, I would think it would be this movie for Best Picture. Yeah, I think it's a very well written movie. I think it's very well performed. It's very intriguing. It's very talky though. If you can't sit through a talky movie, don't even try. If you per se loved Oppenheimer, then you might really love Conclave. I think it provokes a lot of thought about religion, politics, what it happens when you blend them together. I have my own personal opinions on that, but I'll just say I think this movie explored it really well. The story that it tells is very important. You might see the twist at the end and get all upset. I think that the movie makes its point really well, and I almost think if you're trying to argue with the very simple thing that this movie is trying to say, it's almost like you're just not a really great person. And I'm sorry if you're going this into as a conclave hater, but we can have a debate in the comments below. I think Ralph Fiennes is great in this. You know, the weight that he feels on his shoulders really has that Oppenheimer type of vibe that you feel in Cillian Murphy's performance throughout. It's almost like even though it's rated PG, it feels like a very ugly movie where everything feels very stingy and not almost gross because of like how this is supposed to be, you know, pure energy, religion, you know, Catholic stuff. It feels very icky, and I think this movie kind of shines a light on that and puts a realistic look on what would actually happen in this situation. Coming in at number 6 is Nickel Boys. I saw this movie a few weeks ago. The one thing that sticks with me most is this film's aesthetic. There's no denying that the aesthetic of this movie is, and that's mostly to do with the cinematography. The cinematography to this is some of the finest all year. Sincerely, this is one of the most beautiful shot movies of 2024. And the fact that it is mostly point of view and it's still one of the most beautifully shot movies of 2024 is like amazing. And that's probably, I think it's mostly to do with the aspect ratio that they chose for this project, but still, it's a beautiful looking movie in point of view, which is like not something that you can, like, I wouldn't even think that'd be possible. Like, you would think that maybe doing a point of view movie entirely would almost be like a cushion if you don't think you can do a great job of cinematography, but no, it uses that as a tool to be even better. I've never seen a movie do anything like that, and it's really inspiring. The story that it tells is really tough to stomach, particularly with the fact that this is based on a true story. It's very, very sad, but also doesn't feel like it's, how I put this, trying to be awards bait. And this is, like I said, all the awards movies should be. You can tell that this wasn't written in the idea of, oh yeah, I'm gonna get so many Oscars. They're trying to be effective and tell a good story, but also kind of be like, you know, this is something that maybe the Oscars would typically probably go for. It doesn't feel like it was trying to do that. It feels very organic. It feels very human. Human is what the Academy goes for, not programming. A movie like Emilia Perez, that feels like that's programming to make people feel. Nickel Boys feels like it's an actual making you feel real human story with actual emotion put into it and care. Coming in at number 5 is the last movie that I watched before I did this video. I watched this a few weeks ago. I'm glad that I gave it some time to resonate because, like I said, these award movies are really about how they resonate with you. When I first saw it, I actually immediately put it in this spot, but I said that's only if it ages well. I'm going to have to lower it if it just kind of dwindles out of my mind. And it did not dwindle out of my mind, and I think this is maybe like the most emotionally impactful movie. Yeah, it's the most emotionally impactful movie on this entire list. And that is I'm Still Here. I'm honestly blown away because up until, you know, Oscar nomination day, like, this movie was just completely in the background, whatever. It probably wasn't gonna get nominated. You know, I just knew Best Actress was possible because of Fernando Torres. Getting a Best Picture nomination was like, that's not gonna happen. And usually, I always find that there's always like a random Best Actress nomination that isn't only Best Actress. I think it happened a few times, like Renee Zellweger in 2020. You know, and I never watched that movie, so I didn't really plan on watching this. But then got Best Picture. I was like, okay, I should watch this now, and I loved it. I thought, like I said, it was the most emotionally impactful movie of this year. There's some moments in this movie where I just felt absolutely devastated. Like I said, like with Nickel Boys, it doesn't feel like Oscar bait. It feels like it's human. And yes, it's just stuff that plays well at Oscars. But I keep on repeating that to make my point about Emilia Perez. But I don't remember the exact scene. I'll just say this scene. See the poster? Come on. This scene. One of the most emotionally devastating things I saw last year. Yeah, nothing quite compares to the gut-wrenching feeling. My only big complaint with the movie is that it has multiple ending syndrome. Obviously, by the time you get to the real ending, it feels right. But I'll just say, the movie kind of like ends and then it ends again, and then it ends again, and then it ends again. And it's like, okay. Like, the movie is on the long side. Well, on the long side for a slow burn. And in this, yeah, it's 2 hours, 28 minutes. Or 18, yeah, 2 hours, 18 minutes. That's a good runtime, but particularly for a slow burn Oscar film. I thought the acting was phenomenal. I thought what the story that it told was just something that, you know, it's not necessarily going to be a super well-known story, but it's one that it's a really inspiring and incredible story that I'm really glad that I saw. It's a very small-scaled personal story. It's even more heartbreaking because it's a true story, and the cast just does a phenomenal job. And yes, that nomination for Fernanda Torres is so deserved, and honestly, I wouldn't even be upset if she won, even over Demi Moore or Mickey Madison. I would not be upset if Fernanda Torres won for I'm Still Here. Coming in at number 4 is the movie I really wanted to see right when awards season was coming around, and I need to see it again, in all honesty, before I could even say this is the definite placement. But based off my first viewing, number 4 seems right, and that is The Brutalist. I thought this was a great movie. then the fact that it's 3.5 hours long and didn't like super duper bore me, achievement. Achievement right there. Give it best director. I think best director with the three nominations that I like and the two that I don't. Those three nominations that I like are all really good nominations. That's Freddie Corbett, Corlene Farjat, and Sean Baker. I would not be upset at all if any of those three won. And if Denis Villeneuve was in there, that would be like, we would have an amazing year for best director category. But the fact that we threw in the Amelia Perez director and James Mangold just kind of soured this category for me. But the three nominations I do like are all fantastic nominations. I feel like I can't pick between the three, honestly, because Brady Corbett just is such an inspiring film, particularly since when I say this guy's 36 years old. Yes, he's older. He's nearly double my age, but this movie feels like it's made by somebody like Martin Scorsese. And I'm not saying like comparing their filmmaking skills. I'm just talking about the maturity of the story, the effort that's put into these characters. Like, these characters feel like they're written by somebody who's lived like a full life, like Martin Scorsese, or somebody who's much older. But Brady Corbett's able to write these characters. Brady Corbett and his wife is able to write these characters like with such ease, and I don't know how they did that. And to direct them like they're actually in this time period. When you have so many young directors going for something much different than they are, when you have a director like Brady Corbett or even like Robert Eggers who's going for something completely different, that takes a lot of maturity. I completely respect that. Adrian Brody's fantastic in the movie. Felicity Jones fantastic in the movie. It has a lot to say about the American dream, and is that just an idea, or is that actually, the land itself is actually America the dream? I think what this movie's trying to say is that the American dream is just more so an idea that is about how, and a motivation pusher rather than an actual thing. I think that this movie tackled that really well, and I'm really excited to see what Brady Corbett does next. Coming in at number 3 is, number 3 and number 2 are really torn. They're so neck and neck. I've seen number 3 twice, but I don't think it's fair to number 2 because I've only seen that one time. I want to watch my number 2 again before I can even put this properly, because the first time, on my first watch of both, I put my number 2 at number 2, and I just recently watched number 3 again, and I kind of wanted to put it above it, but I don't think it's fair to number 2. So right now, I'll just say number 3/number 2 is The Substance. I loved this movie so much. It is honestly kind of perfect. Like, I really love The Sub. Thinking back on this movie, I think about my score on it. I'm like, why did I only give this 4.5? Like, when I think about it, sometimes I want to give it a 5 now, especially on my rewatch, which I just did the other day. My number 2 was a 4.5, so that's where I'm torn. An amazingly thought out film, and I think what The Substance does perfectly is just, it's perfect execution of a premise. A movie that checks off all the boxes of what an audience could possibly want out of an idea within its runtime, without needing a sequel, without needing a bigger budget. This movie's budget was about 20 million or 17 million or something like that. And it perfectly checks off everything you want. And when I say what you want, I mean if you're a person who likes body horror, a person that likes just maybe a movie watcher in general. But this movie just perfectly checks off the boxes as I'm watching it of like, that's a cool idea. What if they did this? What if they did that? This movie constantly checks off all of your what ifs with this concept, but also perfectly explores its themes and just gets the pace of the movie right. It's just really well done. The makeup in this is terrifying, gross, and just all really great work. The cinematography is different. It's bold. It's super high aperture, really in your face. Dennis Quaid is gross. I really loved it. Coming in at number 2 is Anora. I will never forget watching this movie. There's movies that are so like sad and traumatic. Feels like you just were put through like the most horrible thing you could be put through. Almost part of you wants to hate it because of that. You sit on it, but as a piece of, artwork, and you go, that was just incredible. But my God, did that make me feel crappy? My God. These characters go through it, but what I loved about this movie is that it doesn't feel like torture porn. It is what it is type of logic, because everything that goes wrong in this movie is a very logical thing to go wrong, particularly if you don't know the concept of Anora. It's about this sex worker, falls in love with the child of a Russian billionaire. Obviously, the billionaire parents don't like that, and so it's all realistic, but it actually puts you through that emotion, but also explores the themes of what is love at the same time. It sounds very simple. This movie almost sounds like too simple as I'm describing it, but the way that it's paced, edited, made, acted, it all just makes this amazing movie. At the Oscars, if I were voting, I'd go director Sean Baker and screenplay Corlene Farjat. The whole thing is Sean Baker, yes, did an amazing job with the screenplay, but I don't know if the screenplay works if he didn't direct it, versus The Substance screenplay is already fantastic. Could probably work without Corlene Farjat. She still gave an incredible direction and made it go even above and beyond what the screenplay did. But I think Still, the substance is a great screenplay, with or without her. I don't know if I could say exactly the same about Anora. I mean, it's still a great screenplay, but just seeing the way that Sean Baker did it, I don't know. I just can't imagine anybody else doing it quite like that. These characters feel so original. Like Anora herself, Mickey Madison completely embraces her personality, and she feels like an actual person. All these people feel real, and all the emotion feels so much more authentic because of that. Like I said, it's a very simple premise. It's not very showy. It's not like you can really do an amazing shot list for this movie because of, it's a small scale script, but my god, you give Sean Baker an anamorphic lens, good lord, he's able to overperform on every single level because the cinematography here is amazing. The first half is like, the falling in love, euphoric type of crazy whatever, and then the second half is a lot more bleak, sad, depressing, and slower. But I really like that approach. It's because personally, that's the type of approach I really like. My most recent short film, Reckless, kind of has the same approach. It's an approach I think really works and really can make your message work as well. I'm not saying that I did just a good job. I'm just trying to compare of how I think that's something that does work. I don't know if I did it just as well. Hopefully I did. You can watch and tell me in a survey. Anyway, my number one, as I said in my favorite movies of the year list, this is obvious, and it's Dune Part 2. It's a achievement on every single conceivable level. I haven't said this out loud, but my opinion on Dune Part 2 is so high. I love that movie so much. It's almost like if somebody else does not have that movie as their favorite of the year, I can't express how I feel about that with almost not insulting them. Honestly, feel like Dune Part 2 just completely is like such a staggering masterpiece. I honestly feel like you can't even make an argument for anything else, personally. Like, I honestly think like you might be missing a few brain cells if you don't. Like, that's what I mean by like I haven't said this out loud. I just want to express how good I think this movie is. I don't actually mean that, but that's what my brain goes to when I'm thinking about how good this movie is. It goes to places where I'm thinking to myself, like, how does somebody not have this as the best movie of the year, like, period, and all around the best movie? I mean, maybe you have different priorities, but still beyond that, it's the best edited, directed, cinematography, paced, acted. It's like, I feel like it still checks all the boxes, even if it still isn't your typical type of movie. It's creative. It's not like pure only weird quirky sci-fi visuals. Like, it has so much more going for it beyond like your typical sci-fi extravaganza. And it's funny because that movie got like rave reviews and I was part of that. Here I am, I still don't feel like people quite understand how good this movie was. Denis Villeneuve being snubbed again is like the biggest disgrace of all time. I think Dune Part 2 is Empire Strikes Back of our generation, and I'm not somebody who loves Empire Strikes Back. I'm just saying that as like a comparison. One of the best sci-fi movies ever made, one of my favorite movies ever made. It's not winning Best Picture, which is, if Dune Part 2 came out in November, it would totally be winning right now, and I'd put money on that. So comment down below your guys' list of the ranking. If you don't have Dune Part 2 at number 1, I am going to insult you. Just kidding, I won't, but I will be thinking, why isn't Dune Part 2 number 1 as I'm looking at your list? But anyways, comment down below your list, like, share, subscribe, and stuff like that, and adios.